Good morning and welcome to day 67. This is the day we cover Deuteronomy chapters 7 through 9 and Mark chapter 15. So we are continuing to listen to Moses preach to the Israelites as they are preparing to go into the promised land. Moses gets a little repetitious as we go through here. He once again warns people not to join with the people who are currently living in the promised land, the area of Canaan. He reminds people that God will help you conquer them, even though they seem to be really strong and powerful. Again, there's to be no intermarrying, and everyone is to tear down the altars and the idols that they find. God reminds everyone that God loves them. They are God's people, and He has a special relationship with them. God also points out that He didn't pick the Israelites as the chosen people because they were powerful, strong, the most intellectual, the best looking, the best of anything. They were really a small, insignificant group of people, but God loves them because God loves them. None of this in God's story is about power and strength. It's all about relationship and loyalty and obedience to God. Moses reminds everyone that they can depend on God, but that God also has consequences for people who act against God. In chapter 8, it points out how God disciplines like a father, but more importantly, that God also cares more than any earthly father or mother or parent can do. There's a beautiful little section here about thanking God after eating meals. For many in the American culture, we give a prayer before we eat. But here, God's like, after you have eaten, when your belly is full, sit back, show your gratitude, thank God for the food that you have eaten. Verse 17 to 18 reminds people to stop thinking that they have done anything for themselves. Everything they have has come from God. God is walking with them and God is providing for them. This is, I think, a temptation that many of us fall into. It is easy to look around and say, hey, I worked really hard for all of this. Those people over there should work harder if they're having problems. We all need the humility and the gratitude of acknowledging that what we have has come from God. Chapter 9, we again have preaching to remember God and what God provides. There's a rehash of the golden calf incident, which just reminds us how easy it is to be drawn to shiny things or the easy way of doing things. Very often we don't have the patience to wait. We want a leader that gives us all the answers and makes things easy for us, lets us off the hook. There's a lot of ways that we can be tempted to our version of a golden calf these days. Turning to Mark, Jesus is tied up and taken to Pilate for the Roman final decision that has to be done before someone can be put to death. The Jewish religious authorities do not have the authority over life and death, only the Romans do. So Pilate gets drawn into this, and he knew he was in a classic triangulation situation. Clearly, the Jewish authorities and Jesus had a conflict, and the authorities were bringing Pilate into it to try and resolve the whole thing. Pilate tries to get out of it by turning to a tradition of letting a criminal go during the Passover festival, but the high priest controlled the crowd as well as the whole situation going on, and a criminal, Barabbas, gets released instead. We then get to the time where Jesus is on the cross and he faces mocking and bullying, and he offers no response, which made me wonder, when should we be responding in our lives today, and when should we be silent? I think about when marginalized people are being bullied, and what Martin Luther King often said, that it seems that a lot of people will step back and say nothing when someone that is not them, someone that's from a different group, is facing struggle, turmoil, and oppression. And I think this is something that we still have to struggle with. Do we speak up when it's something that affects us? Do we speak up when it's something that affects someone else but may have no effect on our life directly? And I think that's a tough thing for us to think about. And a lot of us really struggle with putting our necks out there for someone else. But I think that's something that God is still calling us to, that we have to stand up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. what we end with here is this person, Joseph of Arimathea, who's a member of the council. So he is a member of high standing in the Jewish religious establishment. But he's been looking for a Messiah, and he really thinks that Jesus might be it. So he is willing to take a public risk. And after Jesus has died, he goes to the authorities and asks for his body. And then he honors Jesus by placing him in Joseph's own tomb. Now, once a tomb was used, you're not supposed to use it again. So this was a huge thing for him to give up his tomb for Jesus. Which then raises the question, what are we willing to do publicly? What risks are we willing to take on behalf of Jesus in our world today? And I will leave you with that to consider during the day, and we'll see you next time.